Looking for the perfect weekend getaway? Love Lansing like a local. And we promise, you'll love Lansing just as much as we do.
You're watching My Michigan TV.
For Lehto Live. Join author, historian, radio host, and YouTube sensation Steve Lehto as he breaks down Michigan's top stories, talks with business leaders and professional experts, and checks out the variety of statewide festivals and events that Michigan has to offer. You're watching Lehto Live on My Michigan TV.
And welcome to a Thursday. It's a bit overcast, a little gloomy, maybe drizzly outside right now. 44 degrees, going to hit a high of 46. But, they've actually dialed back how much rain they say we're going to get. So they were originally saying it might rain all day. Now they're saying it might rain for an hour or two, maybe. Who knows? It's like I said, it's damp outside. Tomorrow, though, should be 46 degrees and sunny. Now, Saturday, rain and 50. But like I said, it's springtime in Michigan, although I heard rumors there might be snow in the UP this weekend. So the people who live in the UP are a different breed. Even though I have mentioned before, my family's from the UP, but I was born in the lower. But I got 5 brothers who were all born in the Houghton Hancock area. And my parents are from that area as well. And so I feel like I'm a Uper. But when I go up there, they do not call me a Uper. They don't treat me. They say, nope. But you live down there. You are a troll because you live beneath the bridge, as they say. So I got some news here about the Upper Peninsula I got to tell you about. First of all, I mentioned that Finlandia University, formerly known as Suomi College, my grandfather was the dean there until 1962 or so. And they announced recently they're not going to enroll any more students going forward. They're going to cease operations, pull the plug, and walk away from it. And that's kind of sad. I talked to my dad about this not so long ago, and it was very disheartening because he went there. Along with the fact his father was the dean, my dad went to Suomi College. That's where he met my mother. And he said, well, it's unfortunate because he looked into it also and said, they had this crushing debt they couldn't service, and the enrollment was declining. And I said, well, I hear that they had numbers around 400 students, a few more, a few less the last couple of years. My dad said, well, believe it or not, during World War II, it dropped below 100 students. So he said that, schools had issues before and managed to survive. But unfortunately, I think it was the quote unquote debt load that did it. That is, they owed so much money, they couldn't make the payments. And they're faced with, do we default on the payments, go bankrupt? What do we do? So they're going to end operations. Well, the reason I'm concerned about that is that Finlandia University is a school of higher education, of course, but they've also got a bunch of other stuff going on there, including the Finnish American Heritage Center. And that's this beautiful building right there on Main Street there in Hancock. And it's one of the first things you see as you approach the school. And so it's very, very prominent. And the building houses a bookstore. It houses the editorial offices of the Finnish American Reporter, a newspaper I subscribe to because, of course, I do. And also an art gallery and an auditorium. And in the basement, the archives of the Finnish American Heritage Center. And the archives are the largest collection of Finnish stuff in America. You want to know stuff about Finland in America? You go to the archives there. They've got everything from all the Finnish newspapers going back to the 1800s. You want to talk about oral histories where they went out and just interviewed Finns in the community, what life was like during the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. and all kinds of stuff. And so I've mentioned before that my great-grandfather, my mother's grandfather, was a poet who wrote poetry, and his name was Elu Kiviranta. And this is the book of poetry that we put together of his poetry. And my mother did the translations. I wrote the introduction. And my great-grandfather wrote poetry in Finnish. And then he printed it on his own printing press. And he would ride his bicycle around the area and sell his poetry books. He also ran a farm. And he did the poetry because, like many artists, he just felt the urge to do it. And so his poems are a fascinating time capsule of what life was like in America between, say, 1900 and 1920. I mean, he wrote a poem about the Titanic. He wrote a poem about the Italian Hall disaster. But he also wrote poems about just life in America at that time. And so his poems, my mother gathered them all up that she had, and she donated them to the archives. They've got them there. But also, we donated his printing press. They have his printing press on display, and they go, this is the printing press that Elu used to print up his poetry. And then recently, a big donation was made by a guy down in Florida who had a huge collection of stuff from the Winter War between Finland and Russia in World War II. And he had all kinds of uniforms and medals and weapons and photographs. Huge collection. I actually saw the collection when he had it in Florida at a Finnish place down there that I spoke at. And it took up a whole room. I mean, the guy had so much stuff. He spent his lifetime collecting it. And then I was reading an article, and they said, yeah, the guy donated the entire collection to the archives. So it's all at the Finnish American Heritage Center. Also, that is. And so the stuff they've got there is just amazing. And so my concern is, if the school goes away, what happens to the Heritage Center, the reporter, the bookstore? Because the bookstore has a huge section on Finnish language books and culture. So I can tell you that I just re-upped my subscription to the Finnish American Reporter. So I hope they stay in business. But there's a group called the Finlandia Foundation National. Finlandia Foundation National. It's the Finlandia Foundation in America. They are taking steps to preserve Hancock's Finnish heritage with respect to the Heritage Center. So Tristan Kendrick wrote this for WLUC Channel 6 out of Marquette. The nonprofit organization Finlandia Foundation National was created to connect Finnish communities across the country. After Finlandia University announced that it will not open its doors again next year, the organization called an emergency meeting to discuss how they could get involved. FFN President Anne-Marie Pastor said they are now working with Finlandia to preserve Finnish-related cultural assets in Hancock. They include the archives of all the documents, the folk school, the Finnish American Reporter, the War Museum, the North Wind Bookstore, as well as the art gallery. And the folk school I'd forgotten, but they also do offer classes, not for the university, but for the community. So if you want to learn to speak conversational Finnish, they'll have a class on that offered through the Heritage Center. Currently, the Finlandia Heritage Center in Hancock holds a majority of the Finnish assets. FFN said keeping this history in Hancock is an obligation. We are talking about Finnish American history, but it's also American history, and that's why it matters. We don't want to send this back to Finland. This belongs here. And some people are talking about, well, you know, just across the Portage Canal is Michigan Tech, and they've got the Copper Country Historical Archives. The stuff could go there. But if you merge the two archives, the Finnish stuff would just get swallowed up. And I doubt it would get as much attention as if it was still being taken care of by people who cared about it on its own. And also, when she says American history, that is an important consideration, because you have to understand that the history of America, beginning in the mid-1800s, is one of immigration. And so unless you've got ancestors that were natives here when European descendants showed up, there's a very good chance that someone in your past came to America. And the people coming to America is one of the biggest aspects of our cultural identity. I'm talking about Americans, okay? So they talk about things that define America. And America for hundreds of years has been a place where people came to from other countries with the plan on coming here and settling down and becoming an American and striking out on their own. And so all 8 of my great-grandparents came to America beginning the 1890s, I believe, into the early 1900s. And so that is an important part of American history, because I know there's some people in the audience who are going, Steve, I'm not Finnish. Why would I care? Well, no, but the fact that you're not Finnish, there's a very good chance that you're Irish or English or French or German or Italian or something, you know? And there's all these different groups that came to America, settled in different places. And the Finns settling in Hancock is a microcosm of what was happening all over the place with different groups of immigrants. So I think that's important to keep that in mind. Pastor stated that the organization, the Finlandia Foundation National, is only 1 week into the process, but they want to hear more from Hancock residents, and they are looking at what they can do. One of the problems I had with the announcement that they're going to close Finlandia University was that I wondered if they really had gotten word out to the right people, because the solution was money. It was simply money. Now, I'm not saying that if it was $100 million deficit, they could have raised that in a week, but there are some people of Finnish descent who've got money who might have been willing to step up if they had been asked. And I don't know that they asked the right people to find out. So right now, they're looking at saving this one element, which I do agree is the most important thing. If you can't save anything, save that. But the question is, could they have saved more? That's what I'm concerned about. So Pastor says, we're well supported by local people in Hancock and in the area. Everybody is concerned, and we're getting lots of good messages back that this is a good thing we're trying to do. The organization went on to say that even though it oversees many projects, this is one of its most important. We are doing our best to really secure the legacy for generations to come. FFN plans to keep the community informed as it moves forward. And, you know, it's kind of sad. I don't speak Finnish. Someone asked me this just the other day. My mother and father both spoke fluent Finnish and spoke it in their households growing up. My mother passed away a couple of years ago, but she still kept up with her Finnish. She corresponded a lot with people in Finland, and she was very, very active in the Finnish American communities here. My father also speaks Finnish fluently. So I don't. And it's always been one of those things, I wish I did. But I know that growing up, my mother in particular said she got picked on in school by people who said, you got that funny accent. And my mother did have an accent. And now, if you grow up around Finns and you hear a Finnish accent, it doesn't strike your ear funny. But I do wonder if perhaps I would have had a funny accent if I'd learned to speak Finnish as a child. I don't know. But I wish I spoke the language. I'd love to go visit. And I know people who are over there and have come over here from there. And they say, Steve, don't worry, they all speak English. But I'm so scarred from the times I've gone to France. I don't speak French. And how you get treated in France if you don't speak French. Oh, you know that they know you don't speak French. So it's another story altogether. But we're going to talk in just a second about one of the first signs of spring in the Upper Peninsula right after this on My Michigan Television.
Pure is what you make of it. It's how the hustle of the cities can change the course of history. It's the beauty of the things we create on a canvas, on a plate, or stretched high above the sidewalk. It's a patch of green or a stretch of blue, right in the heart of downtown. It's the buzz of it all, or if you prefer, it's tuning it all out. Clear your schedule and pursue your Pure in Pure, Michigan.
Welcome back to My Michigan Television. I'm Steve Lehto. It's a Thursday. Got to tell you that tonight we've got Michigan Fun with Mike Sukent on at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, Michigan Fun. It's a thing we do every Thursday. And tonight his guests are people from the Freeland Walleye Festival. The Freeland Walleye Festival. I love hearing about these events that take place in smaller towns. And then also he's going to interview people from the Skirbick Family Carnival. And that, of course, is an entity that puts on the carnivals that you'll see in and around the state of Michigan this summer. So he'll be talking to them about what they do and all the places they're going to show up at. So Michigan Fun with Mike Sukent tonight at 7 o'clock. Mike Sukent, one of my favorite people, because he, of course, is the guy who runs the website and the magazine, Michigan Fun. Great idea. First sign of spring in the UP, especially at the eastern end. The Soo Locks open March 25th for the shipping season. The Soo Locks open. So every winter, they often shut down portions of the locks, sometimes for maintenance and sometimes just because there aren't ships going out in that heavy weather. But this story is from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, because they are the ones who oversee the Soo Locks. If you ever go to the Soo Locks lately, and I've been there many times lately, you'll see all kinds of symbols around that indicate the Army Corps of Engineers, and it's a symbol of a castle. And the original engineers in the military were the guys in charge of fortifications. So if you went to West Point and you specialized in something, you could specialize, like, say, in artillery, right? Or infantry or cavalry. And for instance, Robert E. Lee was a specialist in fortifications and engineering. And he actually did quite a bit of that prior to the Civil War, partly in Mexico, of all places. So the Army Corps of Engineers, though, now oversees a lot of the things that have to do with navigable waterways. And it's just something that the government a while back said we need somebody who has the capability of taking care of these things. And so when the Soo Locks got built originally, they put locks in there to get, ships through, because you couldn't prior to that because the river was so rocky with rapids and a big drop. So they put in the locks, and over the years they've added more locks, and they've also built bigger ones and higher quality locks along the way. So they do close them, but they're opening them back up. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Detroit District, Sioux Project Office will open the Poe Lock, P-O-E, Poe Lock, at 12:01 a.m. March 25th, marking the beginning of the Great Lakes shipping season. And of course, it's neat that they've got the Detroit District taking care of the Soo Locks. I think they're about the same when it talks about, east-west in terms of where they line up. But they're quite a distance from each other. That is Detroit and Sault Ste. Marie, where the locks are. Poe Lock, by the way, P-O-E, was named after a general, guy very, very well known in Michigan, not Edgar Allan, just in case you're curious. The operating season is fixed by federal regulations and driven in part by the feasibility of vessels operating in typical Great Lakes ice conditions. I've got a couple of good friends who live along the shore of Lake Superior. A very good friend of mine lives in Ontonagon, and he goes out every single day. I suspect he's retired, but he goes out every single day, and he photographs stuff he sees. And right now, all his photographs are winter photographs, and he will go for a walk on the shore of Lake Superior and post photographs of it. Beautiful, beautiful photographs. But trust me, right now, it's still cold up there, and there might be ice in the water. Now, the lake's not frozen over or anything, but you got to be careful what you might run into. The Poe Lock closed in January to undergo critical repairs and maintenance during the 10-week-long winter shutdown. So they don't shut down for the whole winter. They shut down for 10 weeks, about 2.5 months. Maintenance crews performed a variety of critical tasks on the lock, including Gate 1 anchorage component repairs, such as replacing concrete, Gate 1 lifting lugs and turning feet, underfloor drain system inspection, Gate 1 structural inspection for future repairs, Gate 3 inspection for structural repairs, gate jacking and pedestal inspections, valve repairs, gate 3 seal repairs, and culvert intake grate repairs. The miter gates are the large gates at the end of each lock chamber. The gates open and close, allowing the ships to enter and leave the lock and prevent water from entering or exiting while the boats are lifted or lowered. And the engineering that goes into the modern locks is absolutely remarkable because, as you can imagine, if you just think about it, you've got a boat coming in from Lake Superior and it's got to get dropped down to the level of the river, right? So how do you drop it down? Well, you bring it into the lock, close the door behind it, and you let the water out. They don't just open the door, because if they open the doors, all that would happen is the boat would just go flying out. You can't have that. So they've actually got systems of like, pipes and plumbing that go down and underneath. And if you stand above the locks, which you can do on those observation decks, you can see the current of the water when it's filling up. Because when a boat comes in from downstream, it's got to get lifted up. And you can see where the current is coming into that section from those vents or grates, or whatever you call it. And so they're basically, letting the water go in that way or exit that way. But it's not just a matter of opening the gates and just letting the water rush out. So, it makes complete sense when you think about how big one of those iron ore freighters is. And by the way, just so you know, if you ever go and watch these boats go through the locks, you'll see they're going through with about this much clearance on each side. They and front and back also. So in other words, if the lock is this long, the boats are this long. And the lock is this wide, the boats are this wide. And they do that on purpose. So when they built this lock, shipbuilders said, okay, well, take the dimensions of that lock and bring it in a foot at each end and a foot on each side, and boom, we're good to go. And so they're bringing these boats in that barely fit. And it always looks like a feat of magic, if not a feat of engineering marvel. But they do it, and they, of course, know what they're doing. So crews also performed a wide range of other maintenance tasks, including fender timber replacements, electrical and mechanical systems inspections, and preventive maintenance on both the Poe and MacArthur locks, and floating plant maintenance, said the maintenance branch chief, Nick Pettit. Contractors also performed work on the Poe lock ship arrestor project. OCCI of Missouri was awarded the contract in July of 21 for $17.5 million on the project after awarded options. The ship arrestor. That's got to be something that stops a ship, because that's what arrest means in that context. I'm not quite sure how you stop the ship other than just have it come in real slowly and stop. This winter, they completed the new downstream arrestor equipment buildings, installed the new arrestor machinery, and replaced the arrestor boom. This winter, a portion of maintenance projects on Gate 1 required the Poe lock to remain full, while others required the lock to be dewatered or dry. I love terms of art. Maintenance branch chief Nick Pettit said that sequencing Poe lock maintenance and repairs allowed our team to maximize the non-navigation season. The MacArthur lock, located south of the Poe, is scheduled to open April 24th. So the first lock opens March 25th, the second April 24th. The chief park ranger, Michelle Briggs, said, "We welcome visitors into the park for the Soo Lock's season opening. The park and viewing platform will open March 24th at 11 p.m. and close March 25th at 1 a.m. So if you wanna, you can actually go out there at 11 o'clock at night, just like on New Year's Eve, except it's just in March, and wait till midnight strikes, because when midnight strikes, they're opening that lock and letting a boat come through. So you can see the first boat of the season. The park and viewing platform will open at 11, close at 1. The visitor center will host open house from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on March 25th, but you'll have to leave and come back, which you probably want to do anyways. The park is open daily from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers plans to open the Soo Locks Visitor Center May 1st for the summer season. And, ever since 9/11, they had to go in and really, really step up security at the Soo Locks. I don't blame them for this, but now there's fences and gates and security you got to go through. And, you've got a backpack, they'll search it, that kind of thing. And it's kind of sad that we live in this kind of a world, but, that's what it's come to. But for those not able to come to the Soo Locks opening, there will be a Facebook live stream of the first ship on their Facebook page starting at 11:55 March 24th. It's 11:55 at night on March 24th. And that's at the Facebook page of the U.S. ACE Detroit District. And for more details, you can poke around on their Facebook page. Just look up Soo Locks and you'll find it. But I remember seeing the locks as a child. And I've mentioned before, I had an uncle who worked on board one of the iron ore boats. And so for about 5 minutes, when I heard that a ship had sunk that became the Edmund Fitzgerald in the news, I actually had a thought my uncle could be on that boat, because they had simply announced that a large iron ore boat had sunk. And my uncle served on a boat called the Leon Falk Jr. at one point, and later he was on another ship. And I always forget the name of the second ship. And I've mentioned the story before that I actually got a tour of that boat when I was in kindergarten or first grade, along with several of my brothers and my mother. This is my mother's brother who worked on the boat. He spent his entire career working on these boats on the Great Lakes, doing iron ore runs back and forth. And, I was always aware of these boats, I think a little bit more than the average person, especially before the Edmund Fitzgerald sank. And so I can tell you that one day my other uncle, which of course would be the brother of the guy I'm talking about, went to Sault Ste. Marie, and someone in the family had said, hey, Wilbur's boat might be going through while you guys are there. And my uncle thought, I'll keep an eye out for that. And so this was back, I don't think there was a big observation deck there. I think you could just stand on the side and watch the boats go by. And less security, of course, was way before 9/11. I'm talking about the mid-60s here, early 70s maybe. And of course, the Leon Falk Jr. happens to be coming through, and my other uncle looks over and sees it. Hey, it's the Leon Falk Jr. And there's not that many people on board these ships, right? There's, a handful of guys on board, 25, 30 guys on board. And as the boat comes in, of course, it's got to be lifted up and then sent out. So it spends a few minutes in that lock. So my uncle, Leslie, who's the one on shore, walks over to the edge and starts looking for him. And he spots him. And he starts yelling, hey, Wilbur, Wilbur. Hey, how you doing, Wilbur? Look over here, Wilbur. And you got to understand, Finns by nature are a very quiet, introverted people. The entire nation is introverted. There's not an extrovert in Finland. People came to America who are of Finnish descent aren't much better, okay? I am what you call an extremely extroverted Finn, and I'm off the charts. But my Uncle Wilbur and my Uncle Les, you put those two guys in a room and a conversation might involve like 20 words over half an hour, and that's for both guys. And my Uncle Les told us a story later. He said that Wilbur turned around and looked like, it's like the voice of God, or like someone's coming to get me. And then he finally realized, oh, it's my brother. He kind of does one of these and he goes back to work. So I guess later on at a family reunion when they saw each other, Les went over and said, hey, Wilbur, remember me? I said hello to you, Sault Ste. Marie. But what are the odds, But it just happened to be that Uncle Les was in Sault Ste. Marie when Uncle Wilbur's ship was going through. And nowadays, you can find out anything you ever want to know. It's on the internet. If you haven't figured that out yet, I'm sorry, but it's true. So I actually, in later years, looked up my uncle's boat. You can look up the Leon Falk Jr. and it tells you, and this is true of any boat you see the name of, a big boat on the lakes, get the name of it and look it up. There's websites devoted to boats on the Great Lakes. And it'll actually tell you when the boat was built, when it was launched, who actually built the boat, the actual shipbuilder, what company commissioned the building of the boat, how it was named, who it was named for, when it was launched, how many tons of cargo it could carry, how big its crew was, and then if it ever got modified, were the engines ever changed? Was the ship ever lengthened like some of them were? It's all out there. It's all out there. I remember later on looking this all up. I'm reasonably certain that the Leon Falk Jr. wound up going to the old boneyard of ships and got scrapped. But it was the ship that my uncle had spent a couple decades on, I believe. And then he went onto another boat, which name I don't know off the top of my head right now. But I absolutely am amazed at how much activity there is on the Great Lakes. And I know people who, for a hobby, just go sit by the shore at Port Huron and watch the big boats go by. And as they go by, you can see the name, look them up, get all that information, and there's the such and such, and it's got these engines on it, and the captain's name is this. And it's fascinating, especially when you see a boat go by that's the size of like 2 city blocks. And this big thing is man-made and just cruising along. And it's just an absolute astounding mechanical engineering marvel. So gotta love that. But the locks themselves, if you've not seen the Sioux locks, you gotta go see them, because it's almost like, they talk about the wonders of the world. It's obviously not a natural wonder, it's a man-made wonder, but they are an amazing thing to see when you look at them and you see this huge ship come in and fill up the locks right at the edge, and all of a sudden it gets raised up and then gets released into Lake Superior. Is a very, very cool thing. I got a story here for you about a very, very famous attorney here in Michigan in the news right after this on My Michigan Television.
We've all been looking forward to a return to normalcy, especially when it involves a breath of fresh air, a dip in the water, the chance to explore, or just the opportunity to take a break and enjoy the view. Our time is now. Start making your plans now to visit Ludington at pureluddington.com.
A message from Detroit to everybody. The adventurers, the explorers, the nomads, and the foodies, the art enthusiasts, and the music lovers. When you're ready to come, Detroit is ready to go. From shopping and museums to restaurants, parks, and more, Motown has way too much to do in just a single day. When the time is right, all this is waiting for you in Detroit. Begin planning your next trip at visitdetroit.com.
What makes a destination special? Experience wide open spaces, peaceful lakes, winding trails, sweeping vistas, and flowing rivers. All natural, all good, all fun. Your all outdoors adventure awaits at GaylordMichigan.net.
Don't miss out! Download the My Michigan TV mobile app to stay up to date with all of our programming.
One of the best known attorneys in Michigan and even the country is Jeffrey Fieger. Jeffrey Fieger. People in Michigan know who he is, but people outside of Michigan will remember that he was famously the attorney who defended Dr. Jack Kevorkian in every single trial except for his last one. And Fieger is really well known here in Michigan because he does a lot of personal injury and medical malpractice work. And he's one of the best attorneys in his field. No question, no question. I'm an attorney, I do lemon law, but as an attorney, I'm here to tell you that if you had a very serious injury case and Jeffrey Fieger took your case, you're going to get the best result possible simply because he's that good. But he has a medical issue. Jeffrey Fieger recovering from a stroke after elective heart procedure. This is a little unusual. Haley Harding wrote this for Detroit News. Jeffrey Fieger, the Metro Detroit attorney, known for representing high-profile clients, had a stroke on March 1st, according to his family and his law firm, in a news release that they put out just yesterday. Fieger is 72 years old. He's awake and resting comfortably, said James Harrington, vice president and managing partner at Fieger Law. James Harrington is a former student of mine. I kid you not. Harrington said he said Jeffrey is a true fighter and is working hard in his recovery. His wife, Keeney Fieger, said doctors determined that Jeffrey had the stroke following an elective procedure, and the procedure was to deal with a minor heart arrhythmia. So it's always one of those things where you wonder if one caused the other, or if it could simply be that one just happened to happen right after the other. Strokes are really unusual things. I have a grandmother who passed away due to a stroke, and I've also known other people very, very close to me who've had strokes, and they can happen so unexpectedly. And of course, they can be minor, they can be major. I've seen somebody who suffered a stroke and didn't realize it until people walked in and said, "What's wrong with your face?" And their face was drooping, that kind of thing. So it sounds like this happened when he was getting medical attention. So I suppose that's the best that you can hope for, because you can imagine if you're at home and you suffer a stroke and there's no one there to get you to the hospital, you might have issues. The amount of time to recover from a stroke varies wildly from person to person, Keeney said, and the family requested privacy. And of course, they put out a press release. I don't blame them for that, because if word got out that he'd had a stroke and he wasn't appearing in public, people would start asking. And you might say, but Steve, how would people know? Well, the man's got one of the busiest law firms in the Midwest, and he would be making appearances in court right now. And if he doesn't show up in court, but someone else from his firm does, a judge might ask, why isn't Mr. Fieger here? And you might say, Steve, why would a judge ask? Well, judges will tell you quite often that for a pretrial conference or a settlement conference, the trial attorney must attend. You can't send in an underling on a hearing like that. And the thinking is that the underling won't have the authority or the knowledge necessary to settle the case, whereas the actual trial attorney will. And also, judges think that puts more pressure on them to settle the case if both trial attorneys have got to show up in court and be at this conference. So if there had been any settlement conferences or pretrial conferences where the attendance was required by the trial attorney, that question would have come up. And so you can keep these things kind of quiet, but you can't keep them secret. Because if a judge asks that in open court and they say, well, Mr. Fieger had a medical emergency, well, now it's out. And so people would hear that. For those of us who know Jeffrey, he'd love to be back to work yesterday, Keeney said in his statement. Jeffrey has built a world-class team at Fieger Law, and they're continuing the hard work, dedication, and legal solutions Fieger clients expect and deserve while he's away. All clients and potential clients should rest assured their cases are in good hands. And by the way, Fieger Law is actually partly named for his father. And so his father was named Fieger, started a law firm, and Jeffrey Fieger went to work for his dad. And when his father passed away, he just left the name of the firm as it was. So he's apparently very interested in keeping his father's name alive as well. Harrington said Fieger is actively engaging in rehabilitation. While that he recovers, the firm is moving full steam ahead. Fieger has, throughout his career, established a name as an attorney willing to represent a wide variety of clients. In the 90s, he represented Jack Kevorkian, a pathologist known as a proponent of physician-assisted suicide. In more recent years, he's represented families of people killed by police, as well as a student who was shot during the Oxford school shooting back in 2021. He ran for governor in 1998, but he lost to John Engler, who was then a two-term incumbent. Harrington says, we'll continue our mission on behalf of our clients, fellow attorneys, and our legal colleagues to deliver justice for all of our clients. Our stand, as always, is that we won't back down or give up ever. And it's interesting because I taught at the law school, it's a little while ago now, I'm trying to think, would have started there around 2000 or 2001. And James Harrington was in one of my first classes there. And I remember that he's a very smart and intelligent student. That's a good thing. In law school, you'd expect that. And I bumped into him a few times after that. And I knew that he'd gone to work for Jeffrey Fieger. And about a month or so ago, someone called me up and asked me if I knew of any attorneys who handle a particular kind of a case. And I knew that James Harrington did that. So I went to look him up, and I found that he's still at Fieger, and I saw that he was actually rather high ranking at Fieger. And I was kind of impressed by that because he is the vice president and managing partner at Fieger Law. So there you go, former student of mine. But we're all pulling for Jeffrey Fieger. He is, like I said, one of the best attorneys in the country. And it's startling how good the results are that he gets. And one thing I'll tell you about him in particular is that he likes taking cases to trial, and he gets spectacular results. And those two things cannot be said of every attorney out there. There are a lot of attorneys who do personal injury work who want to get settlements, to settle cases fast. Not Jeffrey Fieger. Jeffrey Fieger will look at a case and go, here's what I think your case is worth. And then he'll tell the client, and if you agree with me and want to go through it, we'll go to trial and we'll do what we can to get you that. And more often than not, it seems, that pays off. And so trust me, when a defendant gets sued and the lawsuit says Fieger Law on it, that scares people. And I'll tell you right now, if your name on letterhead scares people in this field, you're doing something right. So I'm pulling for the guy. I've met him one time. I bumped into him at a restaurant, Bo Jack's in Bloomfield. I was leaving as he was coming in, and I looked up, there's Jeffrey Fieger. And I said, Mr. Fieger, I'm a big fan, and I voted for you. He shook my hand. And I go, I'm Steve Lehto. I'm an attorney. And he goes, well, nice meeting you. Thank you very much. And that was it. Literally 30 seconds of an interaction. But I can say I shook his hand, and he is a great guy. So there you go. But we're pulling for him. Jeffrey Fieger, recovering from a stroke after an elective heart procedure. If I get updates, I'll let you know. I often talk about the auto industry on here. And one thing I can tell you is that in the last few years, we've seen a lot of massive things happening, upheaval in the auto industry. Two things in particular. One of which is that they're transitioning over to electric cars. So all the internal combustion engine cars are going to go by the wayside eventually. But the other thing that I liked was a bunch of the car companies managed to revive old nameplates and bring back cool versions of old cool cars. So the Ford Mustang, for instance, had a renaissance, okay? Chrysler with a Challenger and a Charger brought those back, and those are very, very cool, updated, modern versions. Well, Chevrolet brought back the Camaro, and they had an updated, hip Camaro. Well, sadly, the headline says, Chevy Camaro, rest in peace. A successor may be in the works. But Henry Payne of Detroit News says, Detroit's muscle car lineup shrank to the Ford Mustang on Wednesday as Chevrolet announced the end of Camaro production after the 2024 model year. The Camaro's demise follows a discontinuation of Dodge's Challenger. So V8-powered cars like the Camaro are under intense regulatory pressure amid a government-led transition to electric vehicles. But unlike the best-selling Challenger, Camaro had fallen on hard sales time since its sixth generation remake in 2016. And that's the one that I liked. So as we prepare to say goodbye to the current generation Camaro, it is difficult to overstate our gratitude to every Camaro customer, Camaro assembly line employee, and race fan, said Chevy Vice President Scott Bell. While we are not announcing an immediate successor, rest assured this is not the end of the Camaro story. The end may be a new beginning as Car and Driver reports that GM is moving towards a sub-brand strategy focused on Camaro, Corvette, and Escalade as the company remakes its portfolio. The Enthusiast magazine reports that a Camaro SUV will be introduced in 2025 on GM's Ultium battery platform, just as a Corvette sub-brand unveils an Ultium-based SUV and sedan to complement the V8 sports car. And yes, a Corvette SUV is as idiotic as you think it is. Ford pioneered the muscle car sub-brand idea in 2021 with the electric Mustang Mach-E, and Ford credits its success in racking up emissions credits for the continuation of the V8 powered Mustang. So by doing that, they got themselves some breathing room on the gas cars. We're not saying anything specific right now, says Chevrolet spokesperson Trevor Tompkins, but the Camaro debuted in 1967, you'll recall, in the wake of the wildly successful Mustang. Though shy of Mustang's massive sales, the Camaro sold an impressive 200,000 units in its inaugural year and continued strong sales into the 70s as the muscle car segment grew to include such Woodward Dream Cruise classics as the Pontiac Firebird, the Dodge Challenger, the AMC Javelin, and Plymouth Barracuda. By its fourth generation in 2002, sales of the Camaro had dropped to just over 40,000 units a year, and the model had been discounted. Camaro rose from the ashes in 2010 with a fifth generation coupe, part of the rebirth of the American muscle car segment. It outsold both the Mustang and the Challenger for 5 straight years. Now, keep in mind that the Mustang has been built and sold continuously since 1964. So a controversial sixth generation redesign in 2016 ended the Camaro's reign at number one. But buyers and media reviews complained that the sports car was hard to see out of and was ergonomically inefficient. Sales sank 24,000 units last year, a distant third to its Mustang and Challenger competitors. Challenger will also cease production after next year, as Dodge has racked up heavy federal emissions fines. Dodge has introduced an all-new battery-powered Charger Daytona Banshee to replace it. So keep in mind that we also did the story not so long ago about how Chrysler, Dodge, put out that new Dodge Demon Hellcat 170, this, that, and the other thing. It's got 12 names, but it's the one that does the 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds. And they say it's just a crazy car. It's just crazy. You want to buy a crazy car? $100,000. but it's crazy. So I like the way the car companies are thinking in that respect, but I think that that's going to become a thing of the past. So this happens cyclically. We saw this happen in the 70s with smog and fuel economy, but now the transition from gas-powered cars to electric cars, don't get me wrong, electric cars can be extremely fast, really, really quick, like off the launch, right? From the starting line, step on it, they got a mountain of torque, right? But it's a different thing. And I've had people say, Steve, you know that an electric vehicle accelerates really, really hard and fast, and it'll blow your mind. Yeah, but it's still not the same thing. I mean, a rocket launch is fast too. I mean, it's just different. It's different. So there's going to be people like me who are going to probably have muscle cars until they stop selling gasoline. And I'm just not sure when that's going to be. I suspect they'll continue to sell it for quite some time. It might just get harder to find and probably more expensive. But I've got a friend who's got a high-performance Camaro, of all things, and one of the first generations with a high-compression engine, and he needs to run racing fuel in it. And he has only one place he can buy it from in the county he lives in. So, once every couple of weeks, he's going to make a road trip over to this place and buy this racing fuel. And it's like, I don't know, $8 a gallon or something silly. But he does it. He does it because he likes that car. So we'll be back in just a second because Domino's, the pizza company, did something rather silly. I'll tell you about because it cost them. Right after this on My Michigan Television.
We've all been looking forward to a return to normalcy, especially when it involves a breath of fresh air, a dip in the water, the chance to explore, or just the opportunity to take a break and enjoy the view. Our time is now. Start making your plans now to visit Ludington at pureluddington.com.
We are connected to our Lake Huron shoreline, all 93 miles of it. Hidden bays and marinas dot our shores. Points of entry to our world. Open waters and waves, alive with people at play. Inspiration floats on sparkling waves. We are in awe of its strength and in love with its allure. We nurture it, play in it, savor it. Huron County Waters.
Looking for the perfect weekend getaway? Love Lansing like a local. And we promise, you'll love Lansing just as much as we do.
I saw this headline and I thought to myself, I think I know what happened. From Bloomberg, Domino's 8-year foray into Italy ends in liquidation. Now, if you're Domino's, okay, you're a company and you make pizzas in America. Where's the last place you can probably go and take over with pizza domination in the market? I would guess Italy. But apparently Domino's thought they could do it. So Domino's decided to try to sell Domino's pizzas in Italy. And like I said, it just ended after 8 years in liquidation. So it didn't go so well. Domino's pizza franchise in Italy has gone into liquidation after a short-lived struggle to win over customers in what is the birthplace of pizza. A Milan-based judge opened liquidation proceedings for Domino's franchise partner, ePizza, last week, according to a filing with the local Chamber of Commerce seen by Bloomberg News. A court-ordered liquidation could result in a recovery for creditors of 5% of their exposure. They'll get 5 cents on the dollar, so to speak, according to a draft restructuring plan seen by Bloomberg that was submitted last year by the Milan-based firm and its financial advisors. The last of Domino's 29 Italian branches closed last summer, ending the experiment that began in 2015 with a U.S. brand touting pizza toppings that included pineapple and barbecue chicken, which is an unusual take in a country more accustomed to thin crust margaritas. Over the years, the Ann Arbor-based fast food chain's partner borrowed heavily for ambitious plans to open 800 stores. You always hear these stories about, oh, did you know that like in Norway, they put like narwhal tusk on their pizza? Or did you know that in like Japan, they put squid eyeballs on their pizza? And you hear these stories and you hope they're not true. And those two I just made up, by the way. But when somebody brings pizza to Italy and goes, oh, by the way, our pizzas have pineapple on them. There's people in America who will fight you for ordering pineapple on a pizza. Imagine what that does in Italy. So the pandemic apparently hobbled ePizza. COVID-related lockdowns deprived the company of 35% of its revenue, as did rising competition. But you'd think carryout would have been good. I order a lot of pizzas, especially during COVID. I ordered a ton of them. So once largely brick and mortar focused, Italian pizzerias ramped up their home delivery offerings through third-party services such as Deliveroo or Glovo, hurting demand for Domino's pies. So apparently Deliveroo and Glovo are their DoorDash or Grubhub, just in Italy. A representative for Domino's didn't respond to a request for comment. A representative for ePizza, likewise, could not be reached for comment. All those challenges led ePizza to fall behind on its debt payments, with talks on a potential rescue failing to pan out. As of May 2022, it had 19 million euros of debt, which is about $20.8 million, of which 5 million euros were owed to banks, according to the draft restructuring plan. The Milan Tribunal has a hearing set on ePizza's liquidation for June 21st, according to the first filing. I got news for you. There ain't a whole lot there. If you think about what a pizzeria, especially one that delivers, is, it's usually just a storefront with a couple pizza ovens and a phone bank. That's it. And nowadays, it's probably a phone bank and a computer system because people can order pizzas online, which I do all the time also. But really, the assets that they have are going to be a bunch of pizza ovens. And that's going to be it. So there's not a whole lot there to liquidate. I mean, there are some companies out there that get liquidated. They got a lot of assets. And so you really wonder what they sunk their money into. And it very well could simply be that they sunk their money heavily into advertising. and think about all of the pizza ads you see in America, pizza, and Domino's, and the number of pizza places. I've jokingly rattled off a whole bunch. People go, Steve, you missed 5 or 6. Hungry Howie's and Jets and Buddies and Pizzapopolis and Little Caesars and Domino's and Dolly's. And it turns out that, number one, Americans love their pizza. Number two, it doesn't take much to start a pizzeria. And number three, the profit margins are good. So it attracts a lot of attention. So it gets you back to what was the thinking behind us opening up a pizza chain in Italy. We're going to bring American pizza to Italy. I'm surprised they didn't treat that like it was like an insult, some kind of almost like an international incident. Like, don't send your American pizza over here. What are you trying to hurt us? So I would liken this to if somebody in, I don't know, Japan decided to come to America and make hamburgers. No, we're going to show you guys how it's done. Okay. Does it involve squid parts? I hope not. So Domino's spent 8 years trying to establish their footprint in Italy, selling pizza to Italians. And like I said, when I saw the headline, my first thought was, well, that was a dumb idea. And I realized, wait, they tried it originally 8 years ago. So they got this business project to skid for at least 8 years. But now they're out millions and millions of euros, and the people they borrowed the money from aren't going to get repaid. And so that's one of those interesting things. I'd be more curious about how it was structured. Did they take money from investors who owned the company? Or did they literally just bring in a company and borrow the money? Because they simply borrowed the money and there's nothing out there. That's pretty bad for the investors. But if it's banks taking a bath on that one, especially if it's Italian banks, I'd love to be on the board of an Italian bank and call in the loan officer who lent all that money to Domino's to bring pizza to Italy. So there you go. So that wraps up the 8-year foray into Italy for Domino's. And that wraps up my show today right here on My Michigan Television. I will see you tomorrow on a Friday. We'll end the week as we always do, 11 o'clock until noon right here on My Michigan Television. Until then, behave yourself. Bye-bye.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV.